Hello, my name is Alexander Yamamoto, and today we are going to talk about the Second Industrial Revolution. We all know about the importance of the first one and how it changed humankind forever. But what do we exactly know about the Second Industrial Revolution? In today's podcast, we are going to cover new industries and new possibilities in production, the effects of transportation and communication. We will study the industrialization of Germany, also how industrialization impacted imperialism, and finally, we are going to compare the responses of China and Japan to industrialization. The Second Industrial Revolution began in the mid 19th century and continued until World War I. While the First Industrial Revolution centered on textile manufacturing and the innovation of the steam engine, it was rapid new advances in the creation of steel, chemicals, and electricity that helped fuel the mass production of consumer goods in the Second Industrial Revolution. There's no doubt that one of the most important innovations in the Second Industrial Revolution was steel, which substituted the iron. It was Henry Bessemer who in 1856 made the mass production of steel possible. Steel was easy, quick, and much cheaper to produce, which triggered the growth of other industries. By 1880, railroad tracks, ships, and skyscrapers spread. Steel will become the material which machines, weapons, and tools were made. The chemical industry followed a similar pattern of innovation. In 1856, William Perkin created the first synthetic dye, the aniline purple, which would replace expensive natural dyes, transforming the world of fashion as organic chemical dyes could be mass-produced at a cheaper price. Fertilizers were another great innovation. Fertilizers spread commercial agriculture and manufacturing centers, starting to supply farming regions, which would lead to an increase in food production and on population. Chemistry made other important advances with manufacture of explosives. In 1866, Swedish scientist Alfred Nobel was able to produce stable solid dynamite which could be used in mining, construction of railroads, tunnels, and canals. It also enabled the Army and Navy to have accurate and powerful rifles and cannons. It is clear that the innovation of the Second Industrial Revolution that changed people's lives forever was electricity. In 1879, Thomas Edison invented the incandescent light bulb, which replaced the gas lamps.
The world owes this and more to Thomas Edison.
The filament of the first practical incandescent lamp which I invented was of carbonized cotton thread. In the search for a better filament, I carbonized everything like me.
This light bulb will change society as it allowed people to have lighting at night, at home, and in the streets, which was safer, cleaner, and more efficient. Electricity will also increase productivity in factories with extended work hours and safer conditions. The Second Industrial Revolution brought advancements in transportation and communications that would affect trade, migrations, and global interaction. The spread of railroad steamships and telegraph cables made it possible for the connection between cities and even continents. Railroads were constructed almost anywhere, and raw materials and agricultural products were easily transported to factories and markets to be sold. The same would happen with ships made of steel and with fuel-efficient engines, which could carry more freight at higher speeds, reducing the travel time. In communications, the first underwater telegraph cable across the Atlantic Ocean was successfully installed in 1886, and later the invention of the telephone with Alexander Graham Bell, which improved the efficiency of trade. Population in Europe almost doubled between 1850s and World War I, and people started to migrate looking for better job opportunities. Such massive migrations were only possible with the advancement in transportation. For example, until the 1890s, many immigrants came to the United States from Northern Europe because they had good railroad systems that carried them to harbors in Europe, which they could take low ship fares to North America. Better transportation and communication will facilitate global interactions. Industrialized countries grew more diversified and prosperous as their industrial production increased. They had more capital to expand their markets. Advancements in transportation and communication allowed them to have access to raw materials in other parts of the world and undertake a new wave of imperialism. The world started to get smaller. In Germany, the industrialization did not start until 1870, a century after it did in Great Britain. This is because Germany was divided into small states that were caught up in a power struggle between Prussia and Austria. In 1870, the Chancellor of Germany, Otto von Bismarck, won the war and brought the divided states together. This unification provided the platform for industrialization to take off. The new unified Germany imposed several policies that protected their businesses by establishing tariffs that drove up the prices of foreign goods and made German products more competitive, which encouraged trade, employment, and more businesses. It also established social programs with unemployment insurance and sick days that kept people motivated. Germany was also rich in natural resources such as coal and iron ore, and it will develop railways all over the country, allowing different areas to communicate and transport goods faster than ever before. Germany soon became the center of activity for European business community. Human capital was another important resource that Germany had. Germany implemented a technical education curriculum which emphasized chemistry and electricity. In fact, Germany became the leader in distribution of artificial dyes and pharmaceutical products with 90% of the global market. This was an area where Germany thrived in compared to Great Britain. Another difference between the two countries was that Germans were able to keep up with the latest technology regarding their machines, while Great Britain was still using old, antiquated machinery. Banking was another industry in which Germany was ahead, as German banks gave over more money willingly compared to Great Britain. All these factors that combined the efforts of the government, business, and education helped Germany become the leading industrial power. Industrialization impacted the imperialism of the 19th century in a different way. As the European economy started to specialize in industrial production, they needed specific raw materials like metals, oils, cotton, and rubber to produce their manufactured goods, as well as agricultural products to feed their growing population, who were working in factories. In addition, the high productivity of the Industrial Revolution generated a large surplus of finished goods that needed potential markets where to be sold. Colonies and areas of influence became a must, as they supplied these raw materials at low cost using cheap labor, and they also served as markets where imperial powers sold their manufactured goods. These markets were essential because they guaranteed work for factory workers employed throughout Europe, and their social stability helped to avoid rebellions at home. Free trade replaced the earlier focus on complete control of colonial production based on mercantilism. The imperial expansion of the 19th century was trade rather than territory, where new colonies were meant to serve as ports and centers of production and distribution. Technological advances in the Industrial Revolution made imperial expansions possible. Advancements in transportation with faster steam-driven ships, better communications with underwater telegraph, improved weapons with loading rifles and machine guns, and medical developments such as the discovery of quinine, which prevented Europeans from contracting malaria, made imperialism a reality. China is one of the countries that confronted and resisted Western industrialization while trying to maintain a formal independence. However, by 1912, China's long-established imperial state would collapse. The country went from a central presence in the global economy to a weak, dependent participant in the European domination world system. China had internal problems with a centralized bureaucracy that didn't expand to try to keep pace with the growing population. Social unrest and foreign intrusion ignited the Taiping Revolution. Western pressure to fix trade imbalance led to the Opium Wars, where China was defeated, which resulted in a series of unequal treaties that prevented their industrialization as foreign goods and investments flooded China. The country failed when they tried to implement self-strengthening policies and reform were inadequate. At the end, their attempts to industrialize were unsuccessful as they were too dependent on foreigners for machinery, materials, and expertise. Japan confronted the aggressive powers of the West differently. In 1853, U.S. Commodore Matthew Perry arrived at the Tokyo Bay and demanded Japan to open up their ports for trade. Here is the letter that President Fillmore sent to the Emperor. Great and good friend, I have no other object in sending Commodore Perry to Japan but to propose to your Imperial Majesty that the United States and Japan should live in friendship and have commercial intercourse with each other. The outcome will be completely different than China because Japan would undergo a radical transformation of its society, and instead of submitting to the Western domination, Japan joined the imperial powers by eventually creating its own Eastern Empire. The Meiji Restoration restored the power of the emperor as a ceremonial figure and eliminated the shogun. This created unity. A central government was established with appointed governors instead of the daimyo and samurai. Japan launched a state-guided industrialization program where the government established a number of enterprises which were later sold to private investors. It also created a modern infrastructure that imitated the industrial powers. Soon, they established a railroad system, new industries, a military army, a national currency, and a banking system. Japan became a major exporter of textiles using their own resources and without depending on foreign capital. Japan industrialization became a success. By the early 20th century, its economy opened to trade. Technology has changed the world in many ways, but perhaps no period introduced more changes than the Second Industrial Revolution. From the late 19th century to the early 20th century, cities grew, factories made mass-produced goods, and it was easier to get around. Ideas and news spread quicker, and people's lives became regulated by the clock rather than the sun. Life got a whole lot faster and more efficient. This is Alexander, and I thank you for listening.